With Monty gone, the wolves are already circling the MTEX wagon, sensing a moment of weakness. Tommy Norris spends his time in Fort Worth at a high-stakes luncheon filled with guys in oversized cowboy hats who think they can use Monty's passing as an excuse to tear up their old contracts. First up is Danny, who argues that with Monty dead and Cammy stepping forward, control of the company has technically shifted. Tommy shuts that down immediately, making it clear that as far as he is concerned, nothing has changed. He is still the one running operations, making the deals, and keeping the business alive. He even reminds Danny that much of the money Monty left behind exists solely because of his hard work. Tommy presses his advantage by promising Danny that sticking with him will mean more money, not less, and tells him to relax and trust the process. Next, Bob corners Tommy, demanding clarity about the Kilgore field. The field is producing well, yet Tommy is quietly selling off leases instead of drilling deeper himself. Bob doesn't understand the logic, so Tommy admits the truth. He doesn't want to be the one out there doing the drilling anymore. The work is brutal, the risks are high, and he is done gambling with his own neck. Bob's real concern, however, is Cammy. He argues that without Monty's gambler's intuition, he can't see a clear future for the company. And if Cammy wants to survive, staying out of bankruptcy needs to become her driving motivation. Cammy proves she is not one to be played with as she hosts a high-profile luncheon that initially appears to be going smoothly. However, a tense encounter with a group of entitled women in the bathroom rattles her, and when it's time to speak, she abandons her prepared remarks entirely. She speaks from instinct instead, telling the room she is a hunter, meaner than anyone there, and that she didn't come to play nice. This effectively shuts down the idea that she is an easy target, and while the speech leaves many uncomfortable, the applause is loud and undeniable. While the adults are fighting over contracts in boardrooms, Cooper is out in the field, making a name for himself. He takes a massive gamble on his first solo drill and actually hits it big, which immediately puts him on the path to becoming an oil tycoon in his own right. However, this sudden success creates some friction with Ariana because she is worried about the dangers of the job and the reality of his newfound wealth. He immediately calls his dad to share the good news, but Tommy just invites him to dinner instead. Ainsley heads to her college interview with her mother Angela, and predictably, it doesn't go smoothly. Ainsley struggles to understand the interviewer's sarcasm, but she technically meets the minimum requirements and gets accepted. Now that Tommy is president, Angela is ready to spend, and her first request after being picked up by a private plane is a 5-bedroom house in Fort Worth to be closer to Ainsley's TCU cheerleading squad. The family dinner unfolds exactly as expected, with Angela and Ainsley making a spectacle out of the college acceptance with a super expensive dinner no one actually wants. Ainsley is her usual self, belittling her brother, but Cooper is used to it by now. When Angela announces her plan to get a realtor, Tommy suggests she shouldn't make that type of commitment while she's on her period. This pisses Angela off so much that she throws her plate against the wall, scattering the entire table as everyone takes cover. In true Tommy fashion, all he can see is how hot Angela looks when she's mad, and his compliment actually saves him from being crushed by Hurricane Angela. She calms down and agrees he knows her well, but she warns him to handle her hormones differently next time. The anger melts into intimacy as they begin to make out, only to be interrupted by a devastating phone call. Tommy's mother is dead. Cooper is working at the oil well when the pressure suddenly surges. The equipment rattles violently before the well blows in a fountain of oil that erupts into the air, leaving Cooper drenched from head to toe and crude by the time they get it capped. He drives home soaked and smelling like a paycheck in an environmental disaster where Ariana is waiting for him outside. Cooper apologizes for missing her calls because he didn't want to scare her, but the excitement quickly spills out as he admits they've hit not just one but potentially 6 oil wells. Instead of popping champagne, Cooper confesses he is terrified, because he has no idea what the next step is, or just how massive this life change is going to be. While he tries to wash the Texas gold off his skin outside, Ariana finally hits him with the hard truth she has been holding back. She admits she is scared of losing him to the fields, and she has no interest in leaving the town where her life already exists. Being rich is Cooper's dream rather than hers, and while she tells him she is proud of what he achieved, she simply cannot handle the constant fear of him never coming home. The very next day, she officially kicks him out of the house, leaving the new oil tycoon homeless. Back in Houston, Cammy and the MTEX crew are hit with a devastating lawsuit that traces back to a gas well off the Louisiana coast that blew out years ago. MTEX received a $420 million settlement meant to fund a replacement drill, but the problem is that nobody can find the money. It appears the payment went directly to Monty and then vanished into thin air, because he never actually used the funds to rebuild as he was supposed to. Now the clock is ticking. If MTEX doesn't start drilling soon, the insurance company is going to drag them to court. Rebecca steps in to buy some time by meeting with the insurers and threatening to stop paying their $14 million annual premiums. She cleverly points out that paying the settlement directly to Monty was a contract violation on their part, which means the insurers are technically at fault. They strike a deal to avoid a public trial by announcing a new drill and submitting to weekly scrutiny, but they still have the problem of not actually having the money to build the thing. In the middle of all this high-stakes corporate warfare, Ainsley and Angela are providing the comic relief by volunteering at a local nursing home. Things take a turn for the absurd when they decide to throw an impromptu dance party with the residents and serve up way too many drinks. This goes over about as well as you'd expect when the state health inspectors show up to find a bunch of tipsy seniors. Angela ends up in a physical altercation with one of the inspectors, and before you know it, Tommy is getting a call from the sheriff to come bail out his ex-wife and daughter once again. While Tommy is trying to arrange his mother's funeral and collect the coffin, he gets a call from a desperate Cooper who needs advice about the oil and his broken heart. Tommy heads out to the field, but he is way less impressed by the oil, and much more concerned about who is behind the money. Cooper mentions the company named Sunrisa, and Tommy immediately knows something is off because he has never heard of them. He asks Nate to dig into them as they deal with the fallout of Tommy visiting his dad, TL, in the retirement home to inform him of his mom's death. TL accused Tommy of being cold and heartless, while Tommy fired back with stories of his hellish childhood involving an abusive, alcoholic father. Tommy explains that his father's failure is why he is so cold to his own son, as he never had a good father example. But Cooper manages to alleviate his father's guilt by telling him that whatever Tommy has given him is enough. When Nate digs into the Dallas-based funding, the truth comes out that Sunrisa is just a front for Galino, the dangerous cartel leader from last season. Tommy is livid because Cooper didn't even bother to have a lawyer read the contract, and now the family is accidentally tied back to the very people they were trying to escape. A toxic gas leak spreads silently through a hunting ground, instantly killing hunters and the animals they were tracking. As the camera pulls back, the scale of the disaster is revealed, with bodies scattered and wildlife wiped out. It's an ominous reminder of how lethal the oil business can be when things go wrong, especially when dealing with sour gas. Angela and Tommy hit the road, but they are definitely not on the same page. While Tommy is focused on meeting Cooper's mysterious business partner, Dan Morrell, Angela spends the drive scrolling through luxury houses. The trip nearly ends in a wreck when Angela tries to make out with Tommy behind the wheel. Tommy then gets a frantic call from Cammy. The situation at MTEX is worse than they realized because the company is drowning in hidden debt, forcing Tommy to immediately loop in Rebecca for an emergency meeting. The meeting between Tommy and Dan Morrell goes south from the very first second. Tommy accuses Dan of predatory behavior, arguing that he manipulated a 22-year-old Cooper into a contract that could leave him financially ruined. However, Dan isn't intimidated. He reveals a deep, dark history between them, reminding Tommy that he is a former drug dealer who actually saved Tommy's life years ago. Dan insists his money is clean, and that he provided Cooper with an opportunity Tommy never could. To Dan it is just business, but to Tommy, it is pure exploitation. Refusing to settle the score, Tommy walks away and calls Cooper, ordering him to stop drilling until they can talk face to face. Now Cooper is caught in the middle, forced to choose between his father's warning and the fortune Dan has promised him. While the power players argue, Boss and his crew are out scouting land when they stumble upon the remains of the hunters killed by the gas leak. The realization that they are standing in a pocket of gas poisoning hits fast, and as crew members begin vomiting, panic sets in. They manage to retreat and call for backup, but the sight of emergency responders in hazmat suits leaves the usually unflappable Boss visibly shaken and crying in the truck. Tommy meets with Cammy and Rebecca, and the full extent of Monty's financial house of cards is finally laid bare. Despite massive revenue, MTEX is functionally broke. The company is fractured into multiple LLCs, designed to limit tax liability, with profits theoretically flowing into a holding company. In reality, no money is coming in, and the entire operation is being propped up by lines of credit. The immediate crisis is the offshore drilling project. They have no cash to fund it, and Monty kept absolute control over the accounts. Their only lead to the missing money is Alan, whom they track down at the Cattleman's Club. Tommy has to quite literally break a beer bottle over the guy's head just to get him to talk. The lawyer reveals that the missing $420 million is being funneled into an offshore company based in Nassau. The night at the Cattleman's Club takes an unexpected turn when Dan Morrell witnesses Tommy's confrontation with Alan. Dan points out that he and Tommy aren't so different, as they both solve problems with a heavy hand. When Angela joins them, she immediately hits it off with Dan, even suggesting Tommy dress more like him. The group ends up drinking together, but the sight of Dan and his wife's affection leaves Cammy visibly affected by the grief of losing Monty. Dan offers to solve the financial mess for MTEX, but Tommy refuses him outright. However, Dan is a predator who knows how to spot an opening, so he introduces himself to Cammy as an investor and hands her his card. Later that night, the weight of the debt and the loss of her husband finally breaks Cammy as she collapses at home clutching Monty's photograph, realizing she is officially standing on the edge of a cliff. While the Norris family prepares to bury their matriarch, Cooper is found sleeping outside Ariana's home. He claims he was simply worried after she missed his calls, and that he needed his coat for the funeral, but it's clear he came to reconcile. The news of his grandmother's passing softens Ariana, and she insists on going with him, finally letting the walls come down. She challenges him on his lack of a plan, and accuses him of being too willing to walk away, instead of offering a real alternative to the life she is trying to build. For Rebecca, the day begins with another MTEX nightmare. A company driver has collided with a pickup truck, and the other driver was dead before the crash even happened. To make matters worse, the MTEX employee hasn't even been identified yet. Rebecca boards a plane to handle the mess, but is met by a literal storm that rocks the cabin so violently, it turns a routine trip into a nerve-wracking ordeal. In a moment of vulnerability, she seeks solace in a bottle, and eventually the arms of a complete stranger. The entire family gathers at the cemetery to say their final goodbyes to Dottie, but the true conflict erupts during the post-funeral meal, where the family systematically avoids mentioning the woman they just buried, until Ariana refuses to let the silence hold. She calls out the elephant in the room, and forces a confrontation that leads to Tommy finally speaking his truth. He reveals that his last memory of living at home at 14 was finding his mother unconscious on the bathroom floor, and after he saved her life, she simply kicked him in the face and went back to drinking. TL explains that he stayed all those years because he was waiting for the vibrant woman she used to be to come back, believing that love meant enduring even when it costs you everything. After the service, Cammy takes a trip to Monty's headstone with his favorites, a cigarette and a drink, not as an offering but more like a peace treaty with a ghost. She sits in the dirt and wrestles with the legacy of debt he left her, and by the next morning she is officially listing their house to start over. She sets up a private meeting with Dan Morell and lays it all out plainly, by explaining that MTEX needs an offshore rig and a loan between $325 and $350 million. Dan agrees to the deal but adds the condition that Tommy be involved. Cammy agrees, but for now she keeps Tommy in the dark, building a bridge with an enemy while her most trusted ally is left out of the loop. After the heavy funeral, Ariana and Cooper finally sit down for the conversation they've been avoiding for weeks. Seeing Cooper interact with his family gave Ariana a much-needed window into his world. She finally understands that his drive to leave town isn't just about the money, but a desperate need to distance himself from the cycles of trauma that shaped his father and grandfather. However, understanding his motivation doesn't change her own reality. Ariana is incredibly clear about her boundaries. She has no interest in chasing the oil boom across the state, because her life, her job, and most importantly her child, are rooted right where they are. She tells him that she doesn't want him running away the next time things get difficult. She wants a partner who will stay and fight for their relationship, rather than calling a quick exit progress. For the first time, Cooper truly listens, instead of defending his actions. He offers a sincere apology, acknowledging that his fear of the past has blinded him to the beauty of his present. To seal this new understanding and get away from the pressures of the oil fields and the weight of the Norris family drama, the two decide to take a trip together to figure out what their future looks like on their own terms. When the family returns home, Angela acts as the moral compass. Drawing on her experience with the elderly, she urges Tommy to let go of his decades of spite toward TL, arguing that a second chance is as much for the son as the father. She insists that they can't just leave TL in that depressing assisted living facility, which he describes as a converted Motel 6 where people just wait to die. Tommy also finds a moment of peace with Ainsley, explaining that Dottie was shattered by the loss of a daughter, a grief that made her terrified to love again. Despite his massive resentment toward his father, Tommy eventually caves to Angela's pressure and wheels TL out of the home. This is the first step towards repairing their estranged relationship. With TL now home with Tommy, the welcome home is not exactly relaxing. Nate will not be a boots-on-the-ground landman and a high-level executive at the same time without the wheels falling off. To prove his point, he hands over a mountain of paperwork. While the men are drowning in financial stress, Ainsley and Angela decide the family needs a distraction. Food is TL's favorite. On the personal front, Cooper has to prove his devotion to Ariana. Because of her Catholic upbringing, she demands that he drive all the way to Corpus Christi to ask her father for her hand in marriage. After a tense meeting with a skeptical father, Cooper learns it was all a test because Ariana never actually needed her father's blessing to get married. She just wanted to see how far he was willing to go for her. After the man warns him not to hurt his daughter, Cooper gets the blessing, and the engagement is officially on. The celebration is short-lived. Once the business reality sets in, Tommy and Cooper grab a bite of wildlife. Tommy makes it clear that being head of MTEX does not mean he has stopped being a landman, and he wants to know everything the moment it happens. Intimidation tactics do not work, because they are given 45 days to get the rigs moving, or they lose their permits, and they need a staggering $400 million to stay afloat. When Tommy hears the number, no legitimate bank will touch MTEX with their current debt, and only Dan has the money. Back at HQ, the team finally finds the missing lose everything they have built. The only other option is Dan Morell, but Tommy is at odds with Cammy Miller. She chooses the cartel-linked cash over Tommy's advice. Stressed and dreading the pirate dinner, Tommy stops by the Patch Cafe. He is surprised to see Ariana working there as a bartender, but promises he is not there to judge her, knowing his company is now officially in bed with the devil. The pirate dinner is a memory, and the oil expo has officially taken over, turning the town into a high-pressure hive of industry. Tommy is gearing up for a high-stakes meeting in Fort Worth, and in a rare moment of father-son bonding, TL convinces Tommy to let him tag along for the ride. While the father and son bond, Dale and the rest of the crew are window shopping at the expo. They are amazed by the shiny new tech, but there is an underlying sense of dread. Seeing the cutting-edge machinery makes them realize the old-school way of doing things is fading, and they are genuinely worried that the next generation of robots might eventually replace them. Our boy Cooper is still jumping through hoops to prove his worthiness. After facing Ariana's father, he now has to face Isabel, who is the mother of Ariana's late husband, Elvio. Ariana previously admitted to Isabel that she feels guilty for moving on so quickly, but she truly loves Cooper. Cooper eventually wins Isabel over not with money or status, but with his simple, honest devotion to Ariana and her son Miguel. To prepare for the big moment, Cooper calls Tommy asking for a cash advance for a ring. Tommy suggests he call Angela instead, which he immediately regrets because he knows it will cost him. Angela steps up and offers Cooper her own engagement ring, so he can propose without a mountain of debt. But of course, there is a catch, as Angela immediately tells Tommy he now has to buy her a brand new replacement. Despite the hit to his wallet, Tommy agrees to the trade-off. Rebecca and Nate are feeling the clock tick. They bring in Charlie, an offshore geologist and veteran from the BP days, to help them maximize their revenue. In a classic twist, Charlie is the same guy Rebecca had a one-night stand with during her flight. Rebecca is so worried about being unprofessional that she won't even step into his office, but she can't resist the spark and they share a kiss outside the rig. By the end of the day, the business meeting has turned into a full-blown dinner date. While things are getting romantic for Rebecca, they are getting dangerous for Tommy in Fort Worth. Dan is busy mentoring Cammy, slowly convincing her that he is the good guy and Tommy is the problem. When Tommy arrives, Cammy makes it clear she is the one calling the shots. Tommy is forced to pitch a 70/30 split to Dan, offering him 30% of profits to chip away at the loan. But Dan isn't interested in taking it slow. He immediately counters with a 60/40 split, making it sound like he's doing them a favor by shouldering more of the burden. He wants the full 40% funneled straight into his debt, plus a 20% promote until the loan is fully repaid. Cammy jumps at the deal, seeing a faster path to being debt-free and thinking a 60/40 split is a fair price for freedom. But Tommy smells something off. He knows Dan isn't some benevolent investor, as he is a shark looking to use MTEX as a high-volume front to scrub his dirty cash. By pushing for a 40% repayment and that extra promote, Dan is essentially accelerating the flow of money through the company. But Tommy can't really do anything. The business meeting is interrupted when a fight breaks out. TL had spotted an old acquaintance from his roughneck days who made a disrespectful comment about his late wife, Dorothy. This leads to a brutal fistfight that Tommy has to break up. TL advises Tommy to stop fighting his feelings for Angela and remarry her while he still can, telling him life is too short to spend it alone and angry. The night ends at a local bar where everyone, including Ainsley, Angela, Cammy, and even Dan, gathers to celebrate. TL sits alone until Angela pulls him onto the dance floor to help him forget his troubles. In the corner, Dan and Tommy have a heart-to-heart. Dan claims his legal and illegal businesses rarely overlap, but he leaves Tommy with a warning that Cammy's distrust of Tommy is a weakness that his associates could easily use to turn her against him permanently. Tommy is startled awake by a room service attendant after a particularly active night with Angela. In the confusion, he accidentally flashes the staffer, and this leads to a loud and hilarious argument over breakfast that officially kills the romantic mood. While Tommy is busy explaining his morning stunt to a very unimpressed Angela, Rebecca is having her own morning after reality check. She wakes up with Charlie the geologist, but the honeymoon phase ends abruptly when they start talking shop. Charlie delivers a grim report by explaining that the company is basically wildcatting, which is just a fancy oil term for taking a massive gamble on an unproven well. He puts their chances of success at a measly 10% and warns her that they could either hit the motherlode or lose every single penny MTEX has left. Rebecca takes this news to Nate and reveals her theory that Monty wasn't just a victim of a hurricane. She suspects he knew the well was a dud and intentionally let it fail so he could spend his time fighting for a settlement in court rather than throwing good money after bad gas. Nate decides the best move is to pivot to a lawsuit to buy time, but he also decides to play a dirty card against Rebecca. He confronts her about her relationship with Charlie and forces her to sign a conflict of interest form, which deeply wounds her professional pride. However, Tommy proves why he is the best boss ever by telling Nate to toss the form in the trash, because he values Rebecca's talent way more than he cares about HR violations during a billion-dollar project. The romance isn't totally dead for the younger generation, because Ariana returns home to find a trail of rose petals leading her through the house and into the garden. Surrounded by glowing candles, a nervous Cooper drops to one knee and finally pops the question. It is a massive step for the couple and a rare moment of pure joy amidst the drilling drama. Even Tommy shows a rare bit of emotional maturity later that night during a family taco dinner. Instead of picking a fight, he pulls Angela aside to sincerely tell her how beautiful she is and that he doesn't deserve her. For the first time in years, the two are actually on the same page, and they end up kissing like teenagers while Ainsley watches the whole sweet scene from the window. Over at the patch, the crew gathers for a backyard barbecue to celebrate Boss's 20th anniversary with the company. It is a bittersweet milestone because Jarrell is still missing after that horrific car crash, and the group is feeling the weight of the industry. Boss starts reflecting on the brutal toll the oil life takes on a person, and he admits he is shocked he has even survived this long. While Boss is questioning if the hustle is worth it, Dale is leaning into his role as a treasure hunter. He doesn't see the wildcatting gamble as a risk, but rather as an adventure, proving that in the oil patch, you either die a skeptic or live long enough to become a gambler. The morning starts with a truly heartbreaking moment for TL, after his arthritis flares up and he accidentally slips into the family swimming pool. He remains there for hours because he is unable to pull himself out until Tommy finally finds him. TL admits he feels physically and spiritually defeated and confesses that he is just waiting to die while his body fails him slowly. Tommy helps him out and the two share a rare warm embrace that acknowledges the brutal reality of TL's health. In classic Tommy Norris fashion, he finds an unconventional solution by hiring a local stripper named Cheyenne to act as a physical therapist. He figures his father is too stubborn to listen to a real doctor, but might actually stay active if a beautiful woman is the one helping him. To everyone's surprise, the plan works perfectly as the two spend the afternoon floating in the pool and sharing stories. While the pool therapy is underway, Tommy officially promotes Cooper to project manager. It is a massive jump for a kid who started as a worm only months ago, and he is now overseeing the very rigs he used to work on. While it is a proud moment for Tommy, there is definitely some grumbling among the veterans in the field. Boss and the crew aren't entirely sure about Cooper being promoted so quickly, but the kid is currently on a hot streak after going 6 for 6 on his recent calls. With Tommy's full blessing and the hope that Cooper might be a lucky charm for the company, the crew starts to come around to the idea of a Norris Jr. in charge. The boardroom drama reaches a boiling point as Tommy, Rebecca, and Charlie head to Fort Worth for a final meeting with Cammy and Nate. Rebecca and Nate present a rock-solid case for litigation by arguing that they should sue the insurance company for the missing $400 million, rather than gambling it on a well with a 90% failure rate. However, Charlie the geologist gets caught up in the romance of the wildcatting life and delivers a passionate speech about the trillions of cubic feet of gas waiting beneath the ocean. Desperate for a win and tired of everyone telling her to retire to a beach house, Cammy ignores the 90% chance of failure and Tommy's warnings about the cartel trap, and she decides to drill anyway. This causes a blowout between Rebecca and Charlie because she is furious that he undermined her legal advice just to stroke his own ego. After he says some hurtful things to her, she officially ends their relationship on the spot. Seeing the fire in Cammy's eyes, Tommy realizes she is past the point of reason, and he tries to go behind her back to Dan Morell to cancel the contract. Dan isn't interested in backing out because he has positioned himself so that he wins no matter what happens to MTEX. If they drill and succeed, Dan gets his money back plus massive interest, but if the well is bone dry, Cammy goes bankrupt while Dan still collects $300 million a year just from the royalty payments on the land leases. The only person living a stress-free life is Angela, who returns from her gambling trip with the seniors. She didn't just have a good time, she actually hit the jackpot and brought home $300K plus. This leads to a celebration over hot dogs, and Tommy falling even more in love with her. The offshore drilling operation is finally a go, and with it comes a logistical nightmare that has Tommy and Nate glued to their phones. But while the machinery starts to grind, the personal lives of the Norris family are hitting some very turbulent waters. Rebecca is finally doing some damage control on her personal life. She makes the trip to Charlie the geologist's house, offering a reluctant but sincere apology and admitting that she is lonely and still deeply in love with him. They officially reconcile, deciding to keep their situationship alive despite the workplace ethics and the fact that Charlie is about to disappear to an offshore rig for the next 6 months. Out in the field, Cooper is officially flexing his muscles as the new project manager. When a dispute arises over the next drill site, he goes head-to-head with Boss. Despite Boss's vocal hatred for the location, Cooper stands his ground, reminding him that it is his crew and his call. Boss eventually backs down, marking a significant win for Cooper's leadership. However, Ainsley's cheerleading camp experience has turned into a total disaster. Her new roommate, Pagan, is a vegan with a pet ferret who immediately bans meat, music, and light during meditation. Pagan also requests the use of they/them pronouns, a concept that flies right over Ainsley's head. When a school advisor refuses to let her swap rooms, Angela swoops in like a hurricane. She lies about Ainsley having severe allergies to secure a housing waiver, and checks her daughter into a luxury hotel for the week instead. TL's physical therapy sessions with Cheyenne are becoming the highlight of his day. During a late-night aqua therapy session in the pool, the professional barriers finally crumble. She reveals that her real name is actually Penny, and the two share a quiet, vulnerable moment discussing their actual dreams and life plans beyond the oil patch. The main event finally arrives, the grand launch of MTEX's multi-million-dollar offshore drilling rig. Cami is hosting the celebration, and at first, the atmosphere is triumphant. However, the victory lap turns sour quickly. Cami pulls Tommy aside and admits she finally understands why her late husband Monty loved the business, because she is officially hooked on the adrenaline of the gamble. Tommy tries to be the voice of reason, reiterating that he is finished with those kinds of risks because he has seen too many people die chasing that rush. Cami, fueled by her newfound ego and Dan Morell's poisonous influence, decides she cannot have a president who is averse to the very thing that built the company. In a move that leaves all our jaws on the floor, Cami fires him. The safety rail of MTEX is officially gone, and Cami is now steering the ship alone. While the corporate world implodes, a visceral nightmare unfolds for Ariana at the Patch Cafe. A wealthy, aggressive customer who had been banned earlier in the season for harassing her corners her in the alley and attempts to sexually assault her. Thankfully, Cooper arrives just in time. He absolutely loses it, ripping the man off Ariana and beating him within an inch of his life. While the entire incident is caught on security footage, which might provide Cooper with some legal protection, the trauma of the violence leaves both of them deeply shaken as they cling to each other in the aftermath. Landman Season 2 finale begins with Tommy contemplating the next step now that Cami has fired him. He wants to jump ship, but he doesn't seem to want to go to another company. Instead, he decides to ask Nate for the contract he signed with Cooper to save him from Dan Morell. While MTEX paid off Cooper's debt, the actual contract signing over the lease to MTEX was never officially signed by him and Cami. Tommy pressures Nate to keep the contract hidden for 24 hours, even threatening to argue diminished capacity, since he made the deal with his son without lawyers. Their conversation is interrupted by Cheyenne, who clearly spent the night. Though nothing happened between her and TL beyond some much-needed cuddling that the man is genuinely happy for. For some reason, the police think it makes sense to charge Cooper for beating up the man that tried to assault Ariana. After waking up to a peaceful morning where Cooper takes care of Ariana and her child, he begs her never to return to work at the Patch, since the predator could come back. They head to the police station to report the assault, but Cooper is detained instead. CCTV footage shows he beat the man 17 times, which the police argue goes beyond self-defense. Worse, the man later dies. When Ariana learns Cooper won't be released, she immediately calls Rachel. Rachel tells her to barge into the interrogation room and put her on speaker. She appoints herself Cooper's lawyer on the spot and shuts everything down, making it clear that anything said without a lawyer present is inadmissible. By the time Rachel arrives in person, she's already done her homework. She digs up the history of one of the cops who shot someone 13 times and threatens to dedicate herself to destroying the county, exposing their dirt and filing lawsuits on behalf of every victim they've wrongfully killed. Cooper is released, but it's far from over. The chief is clearly pushing for charges, and for a moment I thought this was Dan Morell pulling strings, but no, it's just the cops being self-righteous. Tommy is on his way to a meeting when he gets the call from Rachel. He calls the police immediately to back off his son. He is still lamenting how everything is going wrong when Angela calls, having heard Cami fired him from Dan Morell's wife. Angela is angry he didn't tell her, but he reminds her he only brings her problems when he already has solutions. He conveniently leaves out the Cooper situation. As he asks God what else he's got, a car crash unfolds right in front of him, causing a major accident. This scene cracked me up as he mutters that God did him dirty. Tommy's plan is to get an investor for the oil wells Cooper struck. He meets with Bob, who is more than happy to invest until he learns MTEX covered the drilling cost of the oil wells, and Tommy wants to cut Cammy out of the deal. Bob's company is publicly traded. Even if Tommy repays MTEX, it would still count as embezzlement, and Bob refuses to operate in that gray area with government agencies watching. If Cammy is involved, there's a deal. If not, there's nothing. But who doesn't mind a little gray area? Dan Morell. Tommy lets him know his investment in Cammy is a total dud. There's so much if involved that he would be grateful to see a fraction of his investment back. Tommy pitches Dan on honoring his original deal with Cooper, plus an additional $18 million. The original $40 million would be used to pay back MTEX for the drilling cost, plus $4 million in interest, so the move is legally bulletproof. The extra $18 million goes to CTT Oil and Cattle, Tommy's brand new venture. He throws in cattle because he made the name up on the spot, hasn't registered it yet, and needs something nobody else would think to use. Dan Morell is nothing short of Santa at this point. He wouldn't be holding it against Cammy if she loses his money, since she doesn't know what she is doing, but for Tommy it's different. He threatens to take what he loves the most if Tommy loses his money. Tommy hands the check to Nate, who has also resigned from MTEX, despite Cammy offering him the interim president position. Tommy then heads to the police station and threatens to go public, accusing them of choosing a predator over a young widow who was assaulted, especially after learning the man actually died of a heart attack at the hospital. The police immediately back off and chalk the death up to natural causes. Tommy then heads to Cooper, who is beating himself up for killing someone. His father lets him know he did what he had to do, before asking everyone to meet at the drilling site, where he reveals to everyone that they are starting their own company. 25% profit would be split amongst staff. Cooper has become some sort of magnet for oil sites. Every place he drills has oil. He is going to be the president of the company, Tommy vice, Nate treasurer. Rachel serves as both chief executive officer and chief counsel. Dale heads exploration, TL oversees drilling, Boss runs the crew, and Ariana becomes office manager. CTT actually means Cooper, Tommy, Thomas. Ah, so emotional. I really thought Tommy was going to propose. But no such luck. Ainsley also decides to stay in the dorms after a mutual agreement with her roommate, who helps her with her cheerleading, and she in turn chases off the high school boys bullying her. Tommy has officially stripped Cammy bare. They were his people to begin with anyway. Now how is Cammy going to pay back Dan Morell when everyone who knows how to actually get the oil out of the ground has left?